He's the founder of the Welsh School. And this morning, in essence, he's going to talk about prescribing for the dead.
She's having you on. We're going to do bowel noses.
So here is Bill.
It's an enormous privilege to be here. Thank you very much, and it's such a beautiful place. I understand it was a toss-up between here and Dublin Airport. I'm quite glad that it came up with this one anyway. So I'm going to show you a short film. The essence of my presentation today, the first part is called Rhythm, and it's about the fact that the vital forces are sound. And then the second part is more about shock, which is when the shock is suffered by the life force and ways in which it can be moved to resolution. But I like this film, so I thought, nobody ever gets to watch it with me, so I'm looking for
Toutes les choses, c'est du rythme. Toutes les choses, tout le travail, tout le bruit, c'est des rythmes. Djembe. Tansaba. Pay. Bang. Boom. Les pas de marche de les rythmes. Les paroles, c'est des rythmes.
Kini masenekele ipo seneti. Ekia. Kini masenekele ipo seneti. Ekia. 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 Kini masenekele ipo seneti. Ekia. Ekia.
On est dans le rythme. Toutes les choses, c'est le rythme.
Kini masenekele ipo seneti.
On ne va pas égorger notre culture, on va la garder. Ça va rester. Je suis sûr que ça va rester.
Follow that. Isn't that amazing? I'll leave. Can I leave the blank? That's it. Is that okay? Leave it blank like that. I was in Ghana. I think it was about 2007, and I was fortunate enough to. I was there for a few weeks practicing, and I was fortunate enough to meet a professor at the University of Accra who was also a voodoo priest. And he said, "Oh, you know, homeopathy is going to go down really well here, because in voodoo we use black powder, and in no. Yeah, in voodoo we use black powder, and in homeopathy you use white powder, and actually in their language there's no difference." So people were taken to homeopathy really easily. He said, "Tell me a little bit about the technology," because they're not particularly interested in the facts, they want the technology. And so I started bumbling on about vital force and everything else, and that's all right. And all that, you know, kind of like you do. Well, vital force, feeling a bit of a twit. And he said, "Oh, no, we're sounds." And I had this kind of ding moment that he explained to me that we're sounds. And I immediately connected right back to sort of Hahnemann's work in the sort of pre-technological age, when homeopathy was still, the whole scientific basis was really different. And I came across this thing in the glossary about tunement, which I thought was amazing. Tunement. Tuning, mood, pitch. The tunement of the organism or the life force refers to its relative health or derangement. By using a musical term, Hahnemann suggests that the organism, along with its enlivening life force, so the enlivening life force is the electricity, if you like, the power, and the tunement is the vibration of the vital force. So Hahnemann suggests the organism, along with its enlivening life force, has a vibration and an aesthetic capacity also, which is altered and deranged by disease. Hahnemann also talks about being out of tune. The remedy acts by over-tunement and alteration in tuning. And I thought that was, for me, a wonderful understanding. And I'm nervous to start this talk, but I might warm up later, so bear with me. Aphorism 11. When a person falls ill, it is initially only the spirit-like autonomic life force everywhere present in the organism that is mistuned through the dynamic influence of a morbific agent inimical to life. Only the life principle mistuned to such abnormality can impart to the organism the adverse sensations and induce in the organism the irregular functions that we call disease. The life principle is a Powerwesen. Anyone speak German?
Yeah.
What's the Wesen?
Spirit.
Spirit or being? The life principle is a power being or a power spirit, invisible in itself, only discernible by its effects on the organism. Therefore, its morbid mistunement only makes itself known by manifestations of disease in feelings and functions. Now, he says then in aphorism 12, it's the disease-tuned life force that brings forth diseases. And on about tunement, which I thought was amazing. And then I thought, well, hang on, what does organon mean? It means instrument. And what is it? The organs of the body are their instruments. So the body is actually an orchestra. and each organ is an instrument, and the life force, what we call the vital force, is both the power of the sound to transmit itself, but it's also that which conducts the admirable harmonious function of the organs in harmony. And we could say then that the spirit is the composer of the music that we play or the rhythm that we live to through our lives. I had an amazing experience a few years ago. There was a woman came into the teaching clinic and she talked at about 90 miles an hour, like, well, I've just come off the bus, you know, and there was this woman on the bus and she was putting her makeup on the bloody bus, and I thought, well, Jesus, how, you know. Who do you think you are? She goes, who do you think you are putting your makeup on the bus? Like that. So everybody, you know, the students are all there, and you can see the smoke rising from their pens, you know, another biro, like this. And I thought, I've had enough, so I wrote the word loquacity on the board. And the big question is always, you know, how do you write down everything the patient says? How do you manage to get it all down? And I said, slow down. So I got them, it was really funny, I got them all to take the pulse, you know, like, oh, mine's going fast, boom, boom. So that's my pulse rate at the moment. It will slow down later. So I said, go lower than pulse rate and tap your foot. So let's say you're looking at that kind. That's about case-taking speed. Which was interesting because what happens in the next case was I got them to do their cases at case-taking speed and write their notes at case-taking speed. And actually it was amazing because people started noticing things like what the patient looked like and their gestures and what they were wearing. They also became aware of their full 360-degree environment, which was fascinating when you think about our capacity for peripheral sensing with the ears and the eyes, etc., etc., and the hairs on, you know, the hairs on your back of the neck stand up. That's all part of the 360-degree experience. And up until then, they'd been working on about 20. Smoking pans, God, Jesus. So that was an interesting experiment with just slowing right down. And actually, anybody who comes to see you as a patient, you'll have earned their money just by being, you know, you're getting paid for being relaxed, basically. Yeah. So, tunement, mistunement, rhythm, resonance, harmony. Energy always seeks a harmonic. Do you know that? If you imagine that there's large families and there's a grandparent and a grandchild who have a particular resonance, do you know that thing? It's one. Do you know, there'd be one. My mother-in-law's got 22 grandchildren, and but she has a particular resonance with a couple of them. Do you know what I mean? And actually, what I understand is that energy always lodges in something and resonates with something which is familiar to itself, which actually explains the whole idea of susceptibility. It's actually a resonant process, a rhythmic resonant process. The transmission of the miasm is through a channel which is what we call sora. And sora means actually... technically, it means a rut or a groove, do you know? So if you imagine you're running along a ploughed field, and you're staying in between the rows for the rest of your life, that's the soric miasm. I'll come back to sora later, but I think the understanding is sora is also a channel. So it's interesting when I was learning the miasms, I was kind of always like excited by the psychotic miasm, and a bit like creeped out by the syphilitic miasm, and a bit repelled by the cancer miasm, and there was a sense of adventure with the tubercular miasm. But the soric miasm somehow was like, okay, so some caveman started itching, and he put his hand in a sulphur spring and condemned the rest of us to a lifetime of torment. I mean, it didn't quite work like that, you know. What I began to understand, actually, sora is a process. The other miasms are patterns. So sora is the process or the channel through which the ancestral habits are transmitted. I suppose one of the things that I could say is that Sora represents a reluctance to adapt or to change or to break old patterns or to go a different way to work or to wear something different or to go to a party that you never go to or to notice something you never noticed before. And it conflicts with our, what I would call our primary identity, which is our idea of who we are, you know. And I'm not just talking about your, you know, Bill Rumble, 62 years old, you know, all that blah, 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 4 kids, etc. Your primary identity is more than that. It's also the way you identify yourself emotionally. It's the way you identify your past. It's the way that we feel about ourselves and about other people. In other words, it's a kind of a static continuum. It doesn't have a very strong vibration. You know, when people talk about how terrible their life is and stuff, you know how kind of flat it is usually? I won't say boring, but it can be. But that primary identity is what I would call Sora. In other words, it's the habit of being you. Do you know what I mean? I don't do stuff like that, or I don't change in that way, or I don't adapt like that. And there are other processes that are trying to attract your attention all the time. There's signals and interactions that are trying to disrupt your identity. Do you see what I mean? To improve your health, to increase your vitality, to make you more flexible, to make you become the person that you were designed, hopefully, to be. Or the intention of the spirit is to fulfill a certain mission. And Sora is what kind of makes that hard, because it's this idea, I am, I can't, all that stuff. And the problem is when you get stuck in that rut, not only does life pass very quickly, because nothing ever changes, but you feel worse. And when you feel worse, of course, you have to medicate. And the other miasms are simply the medication pattern. So Sora is the process, the other miasms are the medication pattern for Sora. In other words, you could say, well, I'm just going to keep on eating or ingesting or having pleasure, which is very psychotic. I'm going to go to war, which is the syphilitic miasm. I'm just going to go to the station, which is the tubercular miasm. Look online, you know, flights. Change my room around, change my partner, you know, like that. And the cancer miasm, I'm just going to give myself a really hard time about the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to make a separation. I'm going to split everything down the middle. Not just my cells, but I'm going to say, you know, this is a beautiful place, the airport's a horrible place. I'm going to say that, you know, there's a distinction between man-made and nature-made. Do you see what I mean? It's like, well, everything is nature-made. Airports are part of nature. Do you know what I mean? They wouldn't be there if they weren't part of nature. And the cancer miasm, I think, is particularly insidious in that way. So the miasms are a medication pattern for Sora, basically, and Sora is a channel, and fundamentally it's a channel for the unadapted or the painful vibration or the difficult vibrations of the ancestors, which were never danced, sung, painted, sculpted, shaken. Do you know what I mean? They never moved to expression. Something made an impression and it never moved to expression. And the second part of the talk, we'll be talking about the shock of that impression and the way in which it can be felt in subsequent generations, even if they haven't met that person that first received the shock, which is interesting. So it's all about information. It's all about energy. Information and energy are both resonant processes. Hahnemann refers to that communication system in the organon as being, he calls them symptoms and signs. So let me just do my first little diagram. Can you see that all right? Apparently anyone who can draw a perfect circle is a madman. So I'm quite happy I'm not. So you could say then, oh, I've got something that says Palestine. Is that a distraction or is it okay? That's right. So we could say that's the third level, that's the second level, that's the first level. That's the deepest invisible mystery of all things, which cannot be named. This level here is what we call consensus reality. In other words, we all agree fundamentally on what's in that level, don't we? Sunday morning in Glendalough, for example. And this is what you would call dream time. And if we like, we'll dare to call this the dreaming, which is what the Aboriginals in Australia understand is the vibration that creates everything. And in quantum mechanics, it's called the potential. And in Christianity, it's called God. And Hahnemann he says the closest you can get to that is the understanding of the Wesen, which is the presence, or the energetic body, the energetic being of somebody. And yet this third layer, if you like, must always remain a mystery. And if you found out, somebody would have to kill you. So we call this consensus reality. Is that okay, that model for now? I came across the work of Arnold and Amy Mindell shortly after I graduated as a homeopath. I made the decision when I finished studying in 1987, no more homeopathy books, because I'd read so many. Do you know what I mean? I just got sick of it, and I got sick of the whole damn business about the more you know, the better you are, the clever you are, the more successful you'll be. Blah, 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 blah. Work hard, learn. And I decided that I wasn't interested, but I wanted to carry on the study away from the body of homeopathy. And I was lucky enough to come across the work of the Mindells. And the Mindells were the sort of parents of what's called process-oriented therapy. And it started off when Arnold Mindell noticed that his son had a scab, but he kept on picking it. And he thought, well, that's fascinating. Why the hell is he picking his scab? It hurts. And he realized actually at that moment that the way out is through. In other words, if there's a body symptom or a dream image or something which is troubling you, in any way disturbing the peace of the resonant pool of energy, then the way to move it on is to go through it and amplify it and get as intense as possible to get out the other side. So they started mimicking people's body symptoms and sounds and everything else. There's a wonderful video on YouTube called Arnold Mindell Coma, where he lies down next to a guy in a coma, and the guy in the coma is going, woo! And Arnold Mindell lies down and goes, woo! And after a while, because he tunes in, and your man in the coma tunes in back. So after a couple of minutes, the guy goes, woo, woo! And Arnold goes, woo, woo! Like that. And then he goes, woo, woo, it's wow, like that. And Arnold goes, wow, what is it? And he goes, a ship. And I thought that was so inspiring, really. And that, for me, is homeopathy in a nutshell. In other words, what you're doing is you're picking up the vibration of the disease, and you're seeking to amplify it to, in other words, to move put the power in, which is the power body. Remember, the life force is not just a resonant body, it's also a power body. It's to connect up the resonant body and the power body to move things on. Anyway, I came across this little bit from his wife, Amy, in a book called Meta Skills, which I recommend. Most of you have probably read it. She talks about the technology of compassion. Typically, we notice those aspects of our experience that are close to the way we identify ourselves. And she calls that primary process. These latter signals are unintentional and may be disturbing. No, I've missed a fucking paragraph. Sorry. Typically, we notice those aspects. Pardon my language. All morning. I've been running up to the lakes, going, I must not swear. I must not swear. Sorry. I'll get back to this now. Typically, we notice those aspects of it. See how something always wants to slip out, doesn't it? Typically, we notice those aspects of our experience that are close to the way we identify ourselves. But we don't take notice of those experiences or signals that are further away from our identity. And she calls these secondary processes. So this is a second layer, this is the first layer. These latter signals are unintentional and may be disturbing. Secondary experiences may occur, for example, in spontaneous and incomplete motions, such as facial tics or tripping while walking down the street. Body symptoms. What? Body symptoms. Relationship difficulties. You know, you go out for a lovely meal and everything's wonderful and there's some guy playing flamenco in the corner. You just end up kicking each other under the table. The worst thing is when you've been together for years and brought the kids up and you decide to go for a weekend holiday break in a hotel. Oh my God, the hell. Usually starts on the train, you know. You haven't had any breakfast. I'm not hungry. These latter signals are unintentional and may be disturbing. Secondary experiences may occur, for example, in spontaneous and incomplete motions, such as facial tics or tripping while walking down the street, body symptoms, relationship difficulties, dream images, or environmental synchronicities, such as the sudden squawking of a bird at a meaningful moment. Secondary phenomena are unknown mysteries awaiting unfolding. They're incongruent with our momentary identity. If we aren't aware of the distinction between primary and secondary processes, we may support only the primary process of ourselves and our patients and disavow other aspects which are trying to get our attention. What? Trying to get our attention? What do you mean? Are they alive? How can they try and get our attention? Oh my God, this was another shock. I went to aphorism 7. It is the symptoms alone by which the disease demands and points to the medicine for its relief. The disease is a conscious information system. It wants to connect up with you. It's going like, over here. And you go, okay, yeah. We had I've seen amazing things happen, you know, in the teaching clinic. I love teaching clinics. Because the person might say, oh, I've got a terrible fear of wasps. And the woman taking the case goes, any other fears? You've got to fulfill the criteria, you know. Any foods you like, dislike? Mars bars, tripe? Spaghetti? I think the guy's just had a secondary experience, you know. He's just like become animated by the spirit of wasps. But it's wonderful anyway. It's all part of the fun. You just need a sense of humour. In fact, onto that, you know, there are 3 processes in learning and developing as a homeopath or a stonemason or a musician or a gardener or anything else. The first is attention to form, where you pay attention to form, You're constantly watching yourself and learning the scales, learning the notes, learning how to use the tools, attention to form. And then if something happens after you've applied yourself to that for a long time or a short time or whatever time it takes, and then suddenly it becomes playful. Do you know what I mean? It's like you start to experiment a little bit and not be so concerned about doing it properly. Things start to happen which are unexpected, incongruous. Don't we like incongruity? Of course we do. You're inviting the part of yourself and the whole process. You know that one with 3 bells on the hat that starts to jingle just when you start to think you're really smart? That's like the playful energy. In Zen, it's called beginner's mind. And the idea of beginner's mind is that in the beginner's mind, there is always many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. And the secondary process of learning and developing is to do with developing beginner's mind and actually being playful. And The third part of the learning process is when actually you become part of the thing. It's like magic happens, but you don't know how, or you don't know why, you don't know where it comes from, but you don't even know who you are, you don't even exist. Just amazing things turn up somehow. Do you know what I mean? And these 3 layers of learning belong to these 3 layers, I suppose, of being. But that was a digression. So the symptom then is the what is the symptom in terms of communication? Who's the communication from? Huh? Who? The disease. And who's it to? Don't all shout at once. Whose consciousness? Huh? Whose self? Huh?
Yourself.
Who are you? Well, that's a good place to be. Flexible. So the symptom is a communication from the disease to whom? The patient, the sufferer. Fantastic. So now, the sign is a communication from the disease to whom? To the observer or the witness or whatever you like. So the communication, the resonant, the vibration comes to the patient from the disease. It's called the symptom, and symptom means with the falling body. And the sign is something that's directed at you. And when you pick it up, you no longer are an observer. You become a participant in the process. So 2 little cells become 1 big self. I love that when that happens. I don't like the whole lot. The only boundaries that I observe is I don't talk about myself. But then again, I don't really want the patient to talk about themselves either, but it's a matter of formality. It's called bedside manner, and it's polite, but it's first layer. Do you know what I mean? I feel like this, and then, oh my God, my husband took the dog out and lost him, and I felt heartbroken, and it reminded me of when I was a child and we lost our pet duck. So the signs are directed at you. And what Amy Mindell is saying, that they can include such things as facial tics, tripping while walking down the street. They can also include such things as environmental synchronicities. Now that gets really exciting, is that when the environment joins in, and when the environment joins in, normally I focus on that signal. I had a lovely case in a school in England. A woman hadn't had homeopathy before. She had ME. She'd been weak since having her child. She's a single parent. She's working. This is all the primary process stuff. Single mother with a single child, working as a social worker, and knackered, basically, and never had any homeopathy. In the 3rd year, I said, so shall we do a live case? I couldn't think what else to say. It was the end of the day. She put her hand up and then went, oh my God, what have I done? I said, yeah, come on then. And it was really interesting because she sat there like this, and I'm sitting here, the window's there, and she's sitting here, and it was interesting because actually when we started there was a flash of lightning outside, and for me that was, I knew that we were going to have a really good case, because it wouldn't have appeared like there was a thunderstorm brewing, so it was an incongruent, it stuck out because it didn't make sense. And the interesting thing was, she talked about how sort of fragile she was and how exhausted she was. But it wasn't a heavy exhaustion. It was a kind of weak exhaustion. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like, oh. It was more like, like there wasn't any, do you know what I mean? You'd like to give her a chicken soup or something like that. But anyway, it was fascinating. And then she came to the end of talking about her primary process, which was basically that she had no energy and everything else. I said, well, what do you notice before a storm? And she said, oh my God, I get the most terrible headaches. I said, do you notice anything now? She said, well, actually, I do have a headache coming on. And I took the case of the head pain as a thing in itself, because that was the vibrant. You see, if you like, one of the things you can put here is static. And one of the things you can put here is vibrant. So the vibrant information, when you want to analyze a case, if you use a system, because anyway, I'll come back to the idea of systems, but anyway, she came alive a little bit when she was describing the headaches. I said, what do you normally do when you have a headache? She said, I put my hat on. I went, oh, okay. So you may have gathered by now that this is a silica case, because if you look at head pain better for covering and before a thunderstorm, and also her, I said, how are your nails, by the way? She said, oh, they're awful weak, they keep breaking, and my hair's thin and falling out, and all that sort of stuff. So it was a simple case. But the amazing thing was that she sat there, and we were just concluding the case, and she suddenly went, like that. I said, what was it? She said, I thought that was a hunchback. I said, what do you mean? She said, a fellow had just walked past the window with a rucksack on. So that's honest truth. So the case-taking process, there are 3 stages in the whole thing. There's the receiving and recording. There's the interactive, and then there's the analytical. And the receiving and the recording and the interactive can go back and forth. And you can even throw a little bit of analytical in sometimes if you want to. Sometimes it's as straightforward as receive, record, interact, analyze, give the pill. And sometimes it's like, receive and record, something happens, you know. I never thought I'd be doing this in front of a group of people. But, the impulse to show off is getting worse and worse. But actually, the first 2 parts of that process, they don't have a system. They don't have a system. They're all about disruption. They're all about disruptive imagination. If we want to tune into this level here, we have to have a disruptive imagination. And systems are a way of shutting that down. No system. No system. Ban the system. Disruptive imagination. That's where the disease... If you want to get on the side of the disease, man, that's a disruptive imagination. You need to have a respect for that disruptive imagination. This is disruptive. Wonderful. The system actually comes in the 3rd stage, which is the analytical phase. You know what I'm saying? Could be you use the kingdoms, or you use periodic table, or if you want to be really weird, you even use the repertory. The repertory is particularly good because none of it makes sense. I mean, you know. How the hell did that come up in the proving? You know what I mean? It's the repertory I like because a lot of the stuff in there you can't work out why. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, whoever makes a prescription because they understand the patient's disease anyway? I mean, that's an inflation. You only understand it, the patient only understands it later. When you know what I'm talking about? Anyone ever been in a relationship? Anyone been able to understand what it meant when they were in it? Diseases are like relationships. You only work out what it means later. Do you know what I mean? So if you want the meaning, forget it. What you need to do is to tune in, get resonant, get with that disruptive energy. And just, it's an extraordinary thing, talking about call and response, because actually a call comes out from the disease, which is this mistunement of the vibratory force. And a signal comes out, and if you pick it up, it'll start to feed you more and more information. The tendency is when you receive that thing is to try and pull it back into first layer. This is getting scary. You say to things like to the patient, how do you feel? What's interesting is, what do you notice? What do you notice? Ask the patient what they notice. Wake up the curiosity. Ooh, well, I've got this weird feeling in my stomach. Oh, wow, that's amazing. What's it like? Well, it's like something moving in there. What's moving in there? You know, you're trying to get in touch. Sankaran's got it. He understands that. It's, body sensation is deeper than the person's idea of who they are. Do you know what I mean? This is the place like ideas. They're interesting and it's polite to listen, but you're not going to get the juice.
10. Yeah.
10. That's perfect. Yeah. You need to tune into the disruptive imagination. Has anyone ever been disruptive? If you've ever been disruptive, you're perfect for this work. So information equals energy equals communication, but what we're really interested in is the nonsense. Hahnemann talks about the unprejudiced observer. What's he talking about? Someone who's worked on themselves? No, it's empty-headed. If you want to tune into the empty-headed, you've got to be empty-headed. Don't think in the first two phases, the non-systematic phases. You're just resonating. It's about a call and response. Wake up, notice it, tune into it. Call and response. Could be visual, it could be audio, it could be vibrational, it could be coming through the soles of your feet or through the rattling of a window. Do you know what I'm saying? Tune in. Whoa, something's happening. Something is happening here. You see, information can't be created or destroyed. So if you miss it, don't worry, it'll come back and have another go. It doesn't matter. All you need to know. If you imagine now that there's been this phone that's been ringing for generations, right? And nobody's picked it up. Went to the doctor didn't pick it up. Went to the psychiatrist didn't pick it up. Went to the football match and it didn't get picked up. Went for a walk and it didn't get picked up. And so then they come into you and say, look, I've come to the point where I can't stand it anymore. And you notice that there's some vibration coming from somewhere. And you go, who's there? And there's a stampede on the other end. I want to tell him. No, I want to tell him. Get back. I'm going to tell him. So don't worry that you miss it. There's plenty more where that came from. It'll find the, like if you're tuning in a TV and it goes and all of a sudden you get a picture. It's a bit like that. It'll find your wavelength and then it'll send you the information that you're able to receive and record. So it'll find the information to inform you. So the secondary process, vibrant. There's tonality there. There's dreaming. There's imagination. There's vibration. The patient's emotions are just the gateway. The emotions in themselves are not secondary. It's like water breaking when you have a birth. Do you know what I mean? The emotions themselves are not the source of the information. Has anyone ever found it easy to work out how someone else feels? No. But what they're telling you is that you're about to move. It's like a threshold into something. So when somebody comes emotional, I give them space, but they would then say, so what do you notice now? And they may have body symptoms or images or that sort of thing coming up. That's the stuff you use, not the emotions themselves. They're just the waters breaking like that. Well, how? Sense and follow, that's the secret. Sense and follow. I've got 5 minutes. I'm just showing you some. I'm going to try and show you a few pictures here. This is the. Whoa! It's the fourth time I've done that. Oh, I love technology. Not. So this is how the patient presents themselves to the world, right? You ever seen anyone like that in your clinic? He gets into everything. This one's a bit more interesting, there's a bit more art involved. But it's still primary process, right? It's the way you present yourself to the world. Oop! Now it's getting a little bit interesting. Do you know what I mean? We're getting into the realm of delusion. Woke up this morning. Now it's getting more interesting and symbolic, isn't it? Power comes from the symbolic, not the literal. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, we're starting to get quite a powerful image here because it's not literal. We don't want literal. We don't want the literal. We want symbolic. We want. Do you know what I'm saying? And then it gets really wacky. That's a portrait by John Miro, and we'll be talking about him after the break. That's actually a portrait, and the power in that is, do you know what I'm saying? So we're really in the territory now of the secondary process. So it has a vibrational quality. I've got 2 minutes? 1? 1.5? Whoa! Now you're talking. I went to a Miro exhibition at the, quite by accident actually, these things are so wonderful. And I went to a Miro exhibition at the Hayward Tate Modern. And I walked into this exhibition in this room, and all of a sudden I looked at this painting and it hit me. Like that, it had a power, and I realised that it was alive. And actually, quite a few of his paintings are living things. And that was an extraordinary thing to me because I actually realised that what we call vibrant isn't just what we call alive. Do you know what I'm saying? Places are vibrant, animals are vibrant, trees are vibrant, paintings are vibrant. Post boxes can be vibrant, so can telephone boxes, and anything can have a juice. Do you see? They're capable of fooling you or baffling you in some way and knocking you out of your idea world. Do you see? And these things, they knock you out of your idea of how things are. I went to an Africa Calling exhibition at the Hayward Gallery this time. And I went in and there was a bus stop, like a Lagos bus stop, and then there was a family, there was a father and a wife and 2 children standing at the bus stop. And they were made entirely out of corrugated iron that had been run over by many, many lorries, with a bit of rag that was also found on the road wrapped around them. And as I came in, the father looked at me and he followed me with his eyes all the way across the foyer. And I realised actually that was another major education for me, is actually what we're looking at is other forms of consciousness and other forms of life which are non-literal and they don't conform to consensus reality at all. And all I have to say before I finish is that diseases are in that category. Diseases are in this category. They're not in the Donald Trump category. Although you might think so. So we'll take a break now. Thank you. Ready? What? No? Okay. Come on. What? Have I still got the blue head? How's that? Blue head? Blue head syndrome. I feel like one of those things you get in burger bars, you know, that zap the insects. I've noticed a huge pile of dead midges around my feet. So, back to business. I was teaching at the School of Homeopathy in Stroud recently, and I didn't know quite where to take it because it got, you know, those moments when you're not sure what's going to happen. And actually what happened was that there was a book we were working in the library, and there was a book over there, and it suddenly went, here, here, over here, over here. So I thought, oh, well, I better follow the signal. So I went over and I picked the book up, and it was Roland Penrose's biography of Joan Miro. And I just thought, oh, well, let's see what happens. So I opened it up, and I opened it up at this page. And I'll show you some of his pictures while I read to you. Every artist must find in his work his own method of inducing his imagination to take shape, and to develop some initial idea, however trivial, into a work of art saturated with meaning. The idea, according to Miro, comes with the sensation of a shock, the intensity of which is sufficient to initiate a tension of spirit, which leads to a new emotional activity. He's explained at some length how the process seems to take place. It is important, he insists, that a great variety of incidents should be capable of bringing about this state. Hello? Do you want me?
Sorry.
Pardon?
Sorry, I was asked to pass around something.
Oh. I think I just had a shock. The idea, according to Miro, comes with the sensation of a shock, the intensity of which is sufficient to initiate a tension of spirit, which leads to new emotional activity. He's explained at some length how the process seems to take place. It's important, he insists, that a great variety of incidents should be capable of bringing about this state of mind, but it should not be provoked by chemical means such as drink or drugs. Also, it's unlikely that the same methods will act twice in the same way. If this happened, it could lead to the formation of a system. Sora. And this would impair or destroy the spontaneity which is an essential element in this process. It's only through the uncharted channels of the subconscious that the mainstream of inspiration can flow freely. I work better when I'm not working than when I am, he told me. Who like Saint-Paul Roux, used to put a notice outside his door which said, La poète travaille, the poet works, when he intended to sleep. But the intention that gives birth to ideas can also come through incidents and surprises which happen when the artist is wide awake, or during the long hours when he contemplates objects which may become particularly charged with interest. The atmosphere which favours this tension, he said, is in poetry, music, and architecture, also in daily walks, in certain noises, in the noise of horses in the country, the creaking of wooden cartwheels, footsteps, cries in the night, crickets. The spectacle of the sky overwhelms me, empty spaces, empty horizons, empty plans. Everything that is bare has always greatly impressed me. But the atmosphere is only productive when it somehow provokes a deep, urgent reaction. I work in a state of passion and compulsion when I begin a canvas. I obey a physical impulse, a need to act. It's like a physical discharge. I begin my pictures under the effect of a shock, which makes me escape from reality. The cause of this shock may be a tiny thread sticking out of a canvas, the drop of water falling, the print made by my finger on the shining surface of the table. In any case, I need a point of departure, even if it's only a speck of dust or a flash of light. This form begets a series of things, one thing giving birth to another thing. Now, when I talked earlier about the symptoms and signs, what I'd like to talk about in the second half of the talk is the shock that creates them. And Hahnemann calls that a befallment. Which comes from the German Zufall. Is that how you pronounce it? With the two dots on the A? No, no dots. Sorry. Anyone speak German? What does it mean? A coincidence. In other words, it's what falls to you. And all disease processes begin with some form of shock to the resonant body that we call the vital force. And these shocks have to be, it's like the whole idea of an impression. Something presses in, and then it has to move to expression, which is pressing out. So ideally these shocks will be expressed in emotion or in art or in dance, or in sculpture, or in song, or in music. They have to be communicated. The essential rule of physics that we obey as living beings is that the shock, the experience, must be communicated. And the problem that we look at as homeopaths is when the shock is unable to be communicated in a way that's creative and transformative. So we call this in English an experience. In Welsh, the word, does anyone know the Welsh word for experience? It's a profiad. Which comes from the same root as the word proving. So an experience is a shock which creates a certain expressive process. I thought that was amazing, the idea that we're constantly being succussed and proved. Like that. And the shock doesn't always happen in the patient's lifetime. It could have happened in a previous ancestor. So one of the things that I got excited about was the idea that, can you see the board all right? It's not meant to be smiling, you silly man. So this is you or your patient or somebody in a state of unfinished business. So there's some kind of a shock has occurred. Something's altered the tuning of the life force and you feel terrible. And over here is and that's that person in the fullness of who they might become. In other words, we're all, I believe, here with the possibility to become who we're meant to be. Do you see what I mean? But there somehow seems to be a space in between. And to me, that space in between, so I've only got a little whiteboard, so I'll have to make it a high one. But there's a bridge in between who you are when you're in a state of disease and who you might become. And there's one problem to getting over there from there to there. And the problem is crossing the bridge, because there's something on the bridge that's not very nice. There's a monster on the bridge. And the problem is getting across to who you might become, because there's a monster on the bridge. And the monster on the bridge is the unfinished shock. In other words, it's the shock that hasn't found a creative channel or a creative outlet. And as time goes on, maybe generations, the monster becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and more nasty. Now, if you went into an African village and saw the local shaman, what he'd do would be to say, okay, you wait here, I'm going to go and talk to this guy. And then he'd come back and say, right, he says, you've got to dig a hole in the bottom of your garden and all the family have to wee in a jug and you have to bury the jug. That's what the monster requires. So you go and do that and lo and behold, you can move on. As homeopaths, what do we do? Take the case. Take the case of who?
The monster.
You take the case of the monster. That's right. So we could say that this little fella here, this is Sora. In other words, this is the process of being in that state of non-adaptability. In other words, you're stuck in the rut. You know that idea when you're in a rut? You're going along and there doesn't seem to be any noticeable... it's like you go further and further and further in the wrong direction. I had that experience this morning. I went looking for the top lake, but I missed it. So I kept on going and kept on going and kept on going until I was almost up. I was right up in the plantation and just, I kept thinking, now on this bend I'll find it, but I kept going higher and higher. In the end I had to turn back. But that's like the whole feeling of not being able to break out of the, now I've got to keep going, you know. So Sura, if you like, is a process of separation from the wildness. So when we take a case, we prescribe on the symptoms of the monster. How do you get the monster to appear during the consultation? Everyone has their own way of working. But that's where the remedy image lies. And the remedy amplifies the feeling of the monster. Where? Where's the amplification actually felt? It's felt here. The vibration of the monster is felt in this place. So the monster vibration comes over you. You see what I mean? I'm awful conscious of not getting... Is it still blue?
No.
It's black now.
No, you're patterned.
I'm patterned.
Yes.
So the actual formula is sufferer plus monster, give the remedy, they become one, and you become the person that you're intended to be. That's the actual process of case taking. It's not the person's ideas about themselves that we're working with. What we need to do, first of all, when we're working with the patient, is to connect to the presence. So actually, we think sometimes that you work from the outside in to make a prescription. Actually, we don't. We work from the inside out. You connect, first of all, with the presence. And the presence is another word for the Wesen, or the energetic being of the patient. You know what I mean? When you meet people, the first thing you connect with is actually their presence. And it's impossible to define it. Don't even try. What you do is make a connection with the presence. And the presence will then lead you all the way you want to go until you get to the remedy. There's a very interesting little piece here by Arnold Mindell called The Power of Your Presence. Your presence appears around you and also in the spaces and the rooms you inhabit, as well as sometimes being associated with spots on the earth. For example, the nature of your presence may be obvious to others, but it may well be distant from your consciousness. Presence is a tertiary process. You know, we looked today already at primary and secondary. Presence is a tertiary process. It's not primary. It's not your identity. And it's not part of your secondary process. It's not part of the signals that you emit but do not identify with. Are you with me? Your process mind and your presence are at a third, more intuitive, essential level. They're behind you in a way and prior to all your signals. Though everyone gets dressed up in consensus reality, your best presence, really your most amazing self, is your process mind. It is the subtlest and yet the most powerful force of energy that you possess. If you don't know your presence, you may be confused about why people act towards you the way they do. Some people will love you and you may irritate others. The more you know about your own presence, the less confusing or irritating you'll be. Why? Because the more you live your presence congruently, the less it has to force its way out. For example, if you have a shy presence and live it congruently, it becomes indisputable, like a beautiful forest flower, which is shy. However, if you don't recognize your own shy nature, you look instead like a person who's acting related to others, while not really wanting to talk to anyone at all. Because other people perceive the disjunction, they may be confused or criticize you for not really being with them. Everyone should have their own definition of enlightenment. Some people call it connecting to love, others call it truth. Some say it's empty mind. For me, it's about knowing your presence. The presence is something you can almost feel before you can even describe it as a feeling. You need to know the presence of who you are in order to be yourself, and in order to facilitate your inner world and outer relationships, and even improve world situations. I don't know if you ever met anyone who you get the feeling that they're not really, like the person you see on the surface isn't the same as the person inside, because they're trying very hard. So we could say one of the problems with this fella here is that he's not in connection with his presence, and his presence is so furious at not being connected with that it's now become a monster. You know, that idea Jung said, any aspect of the self which is not loved becomes malicious. And this is the malicious sense. And it actually starts to behave like someone else. It gives you pains, it gives you unpleasant sensations, it saps your energy, it confuses you about what you're doing and how you are. So you could say that this is your known world, or your identity, and this represents the unknown world. And the issue of chronic disease is that basically it keeps you in the known world. And another word for the known world is sora. In other words, sora entails staying in the known world. What makes sense to you, what your relationships are, what you earn, what you own, what you have to do. But sora is a process that resists change. Do you see? It resists adaptation. And the problem when you're caught in that is that you feel worse. And you then look at ways to medicate. So an awful lot of what we do in what we call a capitalist society or the modern world is actually medicating. And somebody once had that. You can imagine somebody once woke up and thought, "Ooh, there's a lot of money in medication." You know, so it's not just the pharmaceutical industry that produce medicating processes. Mr. Cadbury does it, and Mr. Toshiba, and Mr. Toyota, and everybody else. Those are medicating processes. And the idea, for me, of freedom or anarchy is that each of us should actually discover our amazing presence. You know, get in touch with it. It's not actually that scary. Because as soon as you start connecting with your weirdness or your oddness or your unexpectedness, things start to get an awful lot better. And things start to signal to you. Now, the idea that you're walking down the road and you see a tree. Okay, you've been walking that way every day for 20 years on your way to work. All of a sudden, whoo, look at that tree. Well, our Western mind thinks, my God, I must have noticed that tree for some reason. Like a Californian New Age mantra. But actually what's happening in all other cultures at all other times is what they're suggesting is that the tree is signaling to you. Can you imagine that? A process of signaling. It's all about signaling. That tree, for some reason, has decided that it wants to cooperate in your noticing process. So it signals to you. You come downstairs in the morning, the kettle goes, switch me on. Like this. This may seem bonkers, but it's an extremely useful state of mind for a homeopath to be in, because what you're doing when you're receiving a case is you're waiting for the signalling process to open up. And the signalling process isn't from the known world at all, it's from the unknown world. Do you see? And these remedies which are resonant, and they're created by shock, are actually representative of the unknown world. They're representative of that which is trying to signal to you and to move you out of the state of sora, move you out of the state of medication, move you out of these medication patterns that may have come down through your ancestors. The psychotic miasm, the syphilitic, the tubercular, the cancer miasm, and now we've got a whole lot more, the smallpox miasm and the leprosy miasm and anything else. But those are just medication patterns. Do you see? They're habits. Habits of medicating. Habits of medicating. The real issue, as Hahnemann said, is sorrow. It's actually not being in touch with your essential aliveness. It's actually thinking that everything is inside you instead of the understanding that actually you're in it. We are in it. It's not in you. All that's in you, all we are resonators with history. Human beings are resonators with history. And what we're looking at when we're looking at a chronic case is the history. We're looking at the thing that's passing on. Just like there's a grandparent will be familiar with one grandchild, so the energy will choose to lodge in a place where it's familiar. It's all about family. It's all about resonance. It's all about familiarity. Energies will come through and it'll spot you and go, hey, look here, we'll lodge in this. And stuff starts to come up which is beyond that person's everyday reality. And that's where it gets fascinating. It's fascinating to understand that Sora is a process. And that these messages they're choosing somewhere to resonate, because they can't stay, they have to happen, they have to move to expression. So our purpose in life is first of all to clear off the ancestral habit, and then we can start the difficult and dangerous journey of becoming fully who we are in the fullness of our potential. I was talking to a friend of mine from West Africa, and he was talking about Mayasm. And he said, the way we understand it in our culture is that these are the cracks laid down by your ancestors. And I go, well, why would the ancestors put down cracks? And he said, well, they're designed for you to fall into them. So the cracks are laid down by your ancestors for you to fall into. And I said, why the hell would you want to do that? He said, it's to crack you open. It's to crack you out of your idea of who you are and where you're going and what you're doing. It's to actually open you up to spirit, or open you up to the potential to become who you might be. And that is what each of us should be realizing, is that there's enormous and massive possibility. Massive possibility. How's the time going? All right? 10, 20?
35.
Oh, now you're talking. Now you're talking. So when you're taking a case, what you're looking for is a little subtle signal. It may come across as a tiny little flirt, or it may come across as a more powerful and repetitive. It might choose a repetitive pattern. It may be that the patient has a body symptom which you can amplify. An example. I had a case recently. Now this woman came in and her basic issue was she was tired, she had pain in the liver region. But also she was having trouble with her ex-husband, who was a rugby player and he was a bit of a bully, you know. And the problem was that whenever he phoned up, he would make demands upon her, because they had 2 children. Do you know what I mean? And he's the ex. He said, well, you've got to be there at 2 o'clock. She's going, look, I can't make it at 2 o'clock. He said, I want them there at 2 o'clock. Now, I said, what do you notice when you have that? What happens to you when you have that? And she goes, I don't know. I said, what's that? So I start going like this. What's that? And she goes, ooh. I said, come on, let's do it together. Because she's kind of cool, like, so we're both going like this. And I said, have you ever had that feeling before? She said, oh my God, I had it all the time as a child. I said, what's the history? When did it happen? What did you notice? She said, well, it was, she goes, I said, let's do it a bit more. Come on, stay there. What's it like? It's exactly like when I used to go around to my grandparents. Okay. I said, what's the story? Tell me the story. She said, well, my grandfather was a very dictatorial man, and there would be no arguing with him. He was a bit of a bully. And every time I went round there, I used to, if he'd be in the living room and I wanted to get to the kitchen, I used to go out in the garden and kind of go into the kitchen like that. I said, oh, what was his wife like? He said, well, my grandmother died of cancer at 56. I thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So, carcinosin 200. Now, that was for Granny. Do you see what I mean? Even though grandmother died when my patient was 11 or 12 years old. And she came back. I didn't say what I did. I don't give people, like, if you like, an expectation. I don't know what's going to happen to me in the next 5 minutes, let alone them over a month. But she came back. I said, how's it going? She said, well, he just rang me up and said, I want the kids there at 3 o'clock. And she said, no. And I said, wow, what happened next? He argued for a minute and then he slammed the phone down. I said, right, and? He said, well, funnily enough, he's changed. He's changed completely towards me. I said, how are you? She said, well, the pain is much better here, actually, which is interesting because it's not just the person's idea of how they are that we're working on, is it? It's actually what's happening in the body. Body is much, 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 much deeper than the patient's idea realm. We looked at that in terms of primary and secondary process, didn't it? It's not the person's idea of how they are. We might think that's deep, but it's not. Actually, what's deep is primitive and rhythmic. You know when you're listening to music really intently and then you forget about it and you're doing something else and then your foot starts to tap? That's the primitive body we're looking for, the primitive rhythmic body. That's what we need to connect with, not the person's idea about what's going on. We can be polite for 5 or 10 minutes and listen, but what we're interested in is sensing and following the little flirts from the, what would you call, the primitive body, the primitive resonance body. Now, I've noticed that sometimes it happens that there's no shock discernible in that patient's life, because I'm always looking for the shock. Do you know what I mean? You're looking for the shock. When did that happen? What was going on? What created the shock? That Miro would turn into a painting, but you've turned into a monster. And sometimes, you look at cases and you can't find the shock, even their birth. And the thing that really just knocked me away once, a patient came in and he was fine most of the time, but if he drank, he became extremely violent. And he wasn't violent to his family or anything else, he just used to get into fights in pubs. And he said, well, the thing is, I don't know my own strengths. He said, it's almost like I'm somebody else. I said, what do you notice when you feel like that way? And he started to choke a little. I said, what's going on in your throat? Like that. And he stammered a little. I said, that's really interesting. Are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm all right now. I just felt a little bit weird, like something came over me. Oh, okay. So what happens anyway? Let's go back, because you don't always want to push. Do you know what I mean? Something happens in the energy body. You don't want to push it. Back off, actually. Just relax, back off, give it time, because it knows that you've connected. And he said, well, the thing is, I don't know my own strengths, and I could actually tear somebody apart with my bare hands, and it really, really frightens me. And my wife says I'm terrifying when I'm like that. It's like my face changes. So what does it go like? Can you make the face? It goes like that. You know the remedy already, of course. Yeah? Strontium. But there was nothing in his life that suggested that the shock came from him. So I said, what about your parents? Well, my parents are still alive. They're fine. I can't trace anything. I said, where did they come from? He said, well, my mother was born in Kenya in the 1940s. I said, oh yeah, all right, that's interesting. What about your grandparents? He goes, well, there was some people you might get a little giggle with someone, or you get a little signal, and there was the slightest signal on the mention of his grandmother. He said she had her throat cut in the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in 1954. All right, okay, we know that stramonium comes from a violent shock, usually a terrifying situation. So I thought, right, okay, let's do an experiment. I think we'll send the remedy to your grandmother. He goes, yeah, that's a great idea. What are we going to do? So I had this idea, and I got a dessert spoon and put some ethanol in it, and then I got stramonium 10M, I think. It's had a long way to travel, Put the stramonium 10M in, and then I lit a candle, and I just warmed it. Like with a Christmas pudding. Yeah. I warmed the spoon over the candle until the first little bubble appeared in the ethanol, and then I tipped it until it ignited, and I said, here, hold this. So I don't know where it came from. It was bizarre. I mean, God, I hope none of this is going on YouTube. But he sits there with this thing and sends this remedy up in flame to his granny, and I could feel it. It's just like there was this massive sigh of relief in the field that we were in together. And I said, how are you feeling now? He said, I feel great. I feel absolutely amazing. He contacted me 3 or 4 days later and said, I'm not the man that I was when I met you. I never followed up long term. But I thought that was amazing. So actually, sometimes what we're working with is not the living. It's something that went before. And it was just my idea. I mean, often I'll use the remedy to the patient, but because he was particularly open to that suggestion, I felt it was okay. So I had a situation recently now, a case, a woman who's come a long way with homeopathy. I mean, she's come for years with homeopathy, and we've dealt with her domestic traumas and her life, and we've dealt with her eczema and her migraines, and all this kind of stuff has come up. You know, she's done really well on remedies like silica, natrum muriaticum, and remedies like that. You know, what you call broad spectrum polycrust. Anyway, so she's finally, her father died, her mother is in a old people's home and completely gaga, like not responding. I said, well, tell me about your mother. What's the story with your mother? He said, well, she never showed me any affection at all. She was always completely cold to me. And the thing is, I always felt that I wanted to kind of get close to her. I wanted to kind of be, I loved her. I devoted myself to trying to make her happy and to try and get her to love me. I didn't give a lapcaninum, by the way. But mother was frozen. There was something in her. You know when a person gets frozen? Sometimes the shock can freeze you. And her mother, I felt, was very much natrum muriaticum. You know, like rock salt, not even sea salt. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, well, as they say, too much grief makes a stone of the heart. It was that kind of Napmure deep set. Grew up in the war. Anyway, so she said, yeah, no, everything's all right, but I still haven't got over my relationship with my mother, and I'm 50 years old, and it's necessary to do that. And I said, well, what's your story with your mother? And she told me about this kind of frozen, rather cruel, if you like, mother. And I said, well, what was her story? And she'd mentioned it before, but I'd never taken a lot of notice. She came home one day when she was 11 years old and found her mother had died of a hemorrhage, a uterine hemorrhage, in the kitchen. I see the look, yeah. And I said, what's the feeling around that? And she just went like that, and her eyes just went like that. I just left it. I let her sit for a moment. And then she went, oh, God. Whew, where was I? Oh, my God. She said, that's really, really weird. I said, what did you notice? She said, I wasn't here. I'd gone into a place of complete... I'd gone somewhere else, and I don't know where I was. There was nothing. You know that feeling sometimes? I felt that was the opium state that her grandmother had experienced when she was hemorrhaging. And so what we decided to do was, I said, look, how would you like to send a remedy to your grandmother? And she's trained in homeopathy, she knows this. She said, yeah, fantastic, what do I do? So make a little shrine of your mamgi, that's what they call it in Wales. So she makes a little shrine with mamgi and some candles and that kind of thing, and she takes the opium 10M, warms it over the candle, and I've got the follow-up on my phone, so, you know. She warms the candle and sends the remedy to Granny. And I'll just send you the feedback now. I sent my mamgi, opium 10M, last night in a carefully crafted ritual. All felt very peaceful here last night. Love, kiss, kiss. Me. Well done. Next day, the lamp in the lounge where I was switched itself off at the end of it. The bulb didn't blow, the lamp switched itself off. Fantastic. You okay? Yeah, I think so. Woke up feeling bright. Me. How's it today? I feel calm, thanks. Decided I need to sort things out in my own life. Now I've discharged all my duties. Good luck in Ireland. Next one. Most changed this morning after sending the remedy. Felt most positive on waking since I don't remember when. Me. Are you visiting your mum in the next week? I'll be going tomorrow. I was going to take a photograph and ask her carer if there'd been any changes. Went to see Mum. She was very communicative and aware and could answer my questions, which is something she hasn't done for a year. Great, keep me posted. Next. This is another week on. I'm feeling the same feeling I had during your consultation. Started yesterday. It's not a problem. I'm just letting it go. Me. Just notice it and follow it. Keep curious. So this is like 2 weeks after the remedy. She suddenly gets that feeling of... well, that's interesting. So what tells me is that it's actually moved down through Mother and she's now experiencing the vibration herself, which is brilliant because actually it's coming to Earth. And energy always wants to find something that's familiar to itself. Do you see? Actually, whenever you have a discordant energy, it always wants to harmonize. So chaos always wants to create new order, and the energy came down and she started to become aware of it. I was really happy about that. So a week later, how's it going? Text 2. Can I use that bit of your case at the Irish conference? No names or personal details. Please feel free to use whatever you think is useful. I really don't mind if you use personal details of mine or Mum's or Mangi. If I've missed anything, just ask. Me, love ya. And she sent a photograph of her mother before and after, and her mother's like this before, like, and after. She's smiling and all that sort of stuff. It's quite amazing. Quite amazing. So I'm very, very interested in following the laws of physics rather than the laws of the rational world. So you can try that if you want to. Or you can just give the remedy. But it's very fascinating to trace the shock back to source. If you like. Because the presence can be in the previous generation. But it always wants to manifest. And all you have to do is be empty-headed enough to notice the signals from the, what I would call the irrational place. It's what... huh? Go on. Sorry, I thought you had a question. It's fine.
It's a bit like lightning, the way you're talking. It's a bit like lightning.
You mean leaders and streamers?
You know, the tension building up somewhere else and then finding its way.
But the fascinating thing is if there's cloud cover, you get something even more interesting, which is called leaders and streamers. Mm-hmm. So actually the lightning comes down, but it also comes up from the earth to meet it. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, if you look at slow motion pictures of leaders and streamers, it's like that. And actually, that's what's happening during a consultation. In other words, the little flirt comes from the place of the possibility. And we call the noticing of this sentience. And sentience basically means... I'll write it up here. Can you see that? What am I like? Sentience and lucidity. Sentience basically means the continual and automatic awareness of subtle, normally marginalized signals. Do you see? So we're constantly we're interacting with each other, but we're interacting with the environment as well. And most of these signals are quite subtle. And because we have Sora, because we have an idea of who we are, because we have an idea of where we're going, or what we're doing, we may even have a plan. What will happen is we marginalize signals which don't fit with our momentary identity. Do you see? But the unprejudiced observer, the empty-headed observer in you is capable of saying, actually, no, I'm still going to tune in. And I'm going to notice the tuning in, which is called lucidity. So lucidity is an awareness of sentience. Do you know? So it's actually picking up signals all the time, noticing your own signals, but also noticing things that are signaling to you, movements that are signaling to you, objects that are signaling to you. I had a case a few years ago, a woman whose father had died, and they were very close, but she'd spent a lot of time taking care of the mother and taking care of the funeral and like that. And she came in, I said, "How are you?" She said, "Well, I'm absolutely fine. There's no problem at all. I've just got a bit of a, thrush." I won't go into the details of the thrush, as it were, at the moment. But I said, "Well, how are you feeling in yourself?" She said, "Well, I don't know. I've just had to keep going." And everything else. And somebody had stolen my watering can, so I wasn't able to water the plants in my room, so I'd used a bucket. Actually, I got a bucket from the kitchen, and I'd watered the plants that day, and I'd put them on the windowsill, and we had one of those big PVC windows that open in. And that was on the windowsill, totally still day, I mean, even stiller than today. And she said, "No, I'm absolutely fine." I said, "What are you noticing at the moment?" Because I never ask people how you feel, I always ask them what they notice, because I like them to be curious about the process. And she said, "Well, there's a little bit of a thing going in my heart." I said, "What's it like?" She said, "Well, I can feel my heart." I said, "Well, just stay with that, notice it." And she's kind of like that, and she go, "No, it's getting stronger." I said, "That's okay, it's fine, you'll be fine, just stay with it, it's okay." And at that moment, the wind came from nowhere, and it blew open the window, and the bucket of water went right across my floor. And at that very second, she broke down and howled. And it was absolutely amazing, because the tension had built up so much that the environment had kind of, do you see what I'm saying? It had to happen almost like poltergeist. So yeah, she got Napmio 30 anyway. And she's been fantastic ever since, which is great. So these are the type of processes that I'm particularly interested in. Is what can happen if you allow things to happen. What can happen? The worst thing you can do is be an expert. The worst thing you can do is work. It's not about what you know. It's about just being a simpleton. Believe me, the secret is to be a simpleton. Who gets to marry the princess in the fairy stories? Always the simpleton. Anyone who's kissed a few frogs? What do you say, and lizards?
Some poisonous frogs.
Yeah. So it's always the one, the oldest one is the one who, they're the expert. They got all the letters after their name, and they've been published in all these journals, and they're like, on my 17th book. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but the second one is always the one who thinks, right, well, if I learn loads and loads of remedies and loads of materia medica and buy the new computer program, then I'll be able to do it. Do you see what I mean? I'm just going to follow the tracks. So you've got the inflation of the oldest, and then you've got the routine, repetitive attention to learning and all that sort of thing. And then you've got the youngest one who hasn't, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. And there's a lovely story called The Water of Life. And the king is sick, incurable. Every doctor from all over the world has been and failed. And the three brothers are weeping at the fountain in the courtyard. And this old man comes in and says, "Well, what you guys need is the water of life." And they go, "What? Well, where do you find it?" But he's disappeared. So the oldest one gets on his horse, and he thunders out of the courtyard, and he's riding across the plain like this. "I'm going to find the water of life, And suddenly this little man appears. Now, in fairy stories, the little man, or the little woman, or the witch, or the misshapen one, or the talking animal, they are the symptom creator. They are the symptoms. This little man appears, and he goes, "Where are you going, my good man?" And the oldest brother goes, "Out of my way, you wretch." And so the little one fixes his mind on the oldest brother, and the oldest brother rides down a ravine that gets narrower and narrower and narrower until he cannot go forward and he cannot go back. And he's stuck. And then the second brother comes and follows the same road as the older brother, and the little man comes, "Where are you going?" "Get out of my way, worm." Like that. Down, ends up in a ravine from which he cannot go further and he cannot go back. And then the thirdest brother goes to his father and says, "Well, I'd like to have a go." "You'll never make it. You're no good. You've never been any good at anything. You failed your GCSEs and you're leaving cert." And, "Oh, Dad, I want to go anyway." "Oh, well, to hell with you." So he gets his cloppity clop and goes out. you know, the wounded healer. And he's kind of limping over the plain, and the little man comes out and he says, "Where are you going, my good man?" And he says, "Well, you know, I'm looking for the water of life." And the little man says, "Well, I'm hungry." He goes, "That's fine." So he gets down and he shares his cheese sandwich and his bottle of wine with the little man, and the little man tells him exactly how to find the water of life. Now, read the story, it's in Grimm's, marvellous story about the initiation of a healer. I won't go much further with it, but fair to say that his trouble was before him. So that's the feeling that you need. It's empty-headed, as Hahnemann says. It's the empty-headed observer. It's the person who has no past, no presence, just no presence. Yeah, no presence. In fact, what you're doing is you're trying to connect with the presence of the disease. This is the presence of the disease. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's desperate, it's hungry, it's been roaming out there for generations, and it wants to connect with this world, the here and now. It wants to get into this place. And the only way it can do it is trying to get through this person who is the host. Do you see? The familiar one. The problem is Sora. In other words, the person cannot utilize themselves. And so it gets nastier and nastier and nastier. And in the end, well, I mean, it could even kill you if you let it. That's the way I see the process. It's all about process. It's not about knowing a lot and, oh my God, you know, I just used phone box or whatever. TV remote, that's a new remedy. I mean, I'm not knocking the inventiveness of these things, but very often, you know, we have the possibility for unknown mysteries to unfold. Unknown mysteries to unfold from the unknown world. If you see what I mean. Even the unknown world of Granny. Yes?
Have you come across cases where the shock is maybe he's not in the ancestral line, but maybe in past lives, or?
I don't know about past lives because I can't remember. So.
And how would you detect it then?
Huh?
And how would you detect it?
Well, do you know what's interesting is I've prescribed for the predator in certain cases. I had a patient who was being bullied at work, and she had gone off sick. She was broken, really, by her manager, who was her friend once. And so I played a little game like I played with Ranker once in Cork. I said, right, I'll tell you what, I'll be you and you be her. So we swapped seats. And she sat in my seat and I sat in her seat. And I said, right, you be her and I'm you. Okay, so I sat there like this. And she began to talk like this and, you know, said, well, you know, I'm really, really, really angry with you, and I really, you know, I'm unable to show it because now, but I'm going to get you. I'm going to get you. You know, you've taken every Friday off for the last 3 months, and you think you can get away with it? I'm going to get you. I don't like the way you come in and you think you're the big pal of everybody else like that. And she's starting to pull at her throat while she's talking and like this. And I actually understood that this was a lachesis, the woman who was persecuting her at work with lachesis. So I said, hey, okay, let's swap back now. I'll be me and you be you. Oh, great, thanks very much. Phew. I don't know what came over me. I said, well, that's fine, you know, but now, you know, you and I are here together, and I want you to take this. And so she took the lachesis because she was overwhelmed by the vibration of the other person. And I don't know if it could be any remedy. I wouldn't like to say it was animal remedies that do that more. I'm not sure, but I've seen that quite a lot. That there's been a problem with someone, and actually I've given the remedy of the perpetrator. And of course she came back, she said, well, it's just been amazing because, I don't give a shit what she thinks now. But the main thing, of course, is not what she thinks, but her energy comes up and her body symptoms improve and, you know, like that. So, yeah, but past life, I just don't know enough about it because I can't remember my own. So. Any other questions?
Just in relation to the shock, if a person has had several, and we can't remember them all, say,
I love that question.
Wouldn't you consider this as, say, something further back being a shock?
Can I pick it up and run with it?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. The thing is that past events remain dormant unless the sensations and feelings that were originally bound up with them can be revived.
Right.
So a person can tell you about things that had happened in their lives, like in a narrative, but you always have to check the sensation and the feeling. You might notice the hair standing up on the back of your head, or the patient might notice some feeling, or they may experience an emotion. Then you use that. So
you use what they're feeling.
in other words, you're feeling in the state, you are in the state of the shock. Yourself. Don't forget you've had a signal. Now when you incorporate a signal, if you don't have a boundary, which I don't like, I don't have boundaries. I'll go into the state as intensely as I can, because I know that I'll be fine by the time I've had a sandwich and a cup of tea. Now, if the feeling is there or the sensation is there, it's still alive. These shocks are still alive. Like the patient I was telling you about her grandmother, the shock was still alive. Do you see? Prescribed. If you have a patient, you know something terrible happened to them, but they don't have the vibration of it, leave it. It's asleep. Don't wake it up. Don't wake it up, because it'll be in a sealed place. And if you wake up that shock, it'll move into the sealed container with intensity. Now, some people could argue that then the real remedy becomes apparent, but our job is to be gentle. And so that was great, thank you. Any other questions, please? Remember, sonic energy. Sonic energy always lodges in something that's familiar to itself. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to make... All you have to do is sense and follow. That's the secret. Sense it, follow it. Sense and follow. Sense and follow. You don't have to work it out. You don't have to be clever. Sense and follow. If you sense and follow the process, the pattern will eventually reveal itself. You don't have to work. Please don't work until you're at the point of analysis. That's the only time you have to work.
I'm just wondering how you work with children then, like with the, where the parents are alive saying they're bringing, say the problem is apparently in the child, like
Yeah?
just with that example of the grandmother, like how, you know what I mean, how you might articulate that or how you work with people.
With children, it's often a more kinesthetic process. I mean, some children, you will get a sonic, like a sound thing, or a visual thing, but it's normally, it's the way they're moving and what they're doing during the consultation, and you can see some kind of a body process. But don't buy in totally to the parent's narrative. In fact, my dearest colleague, who I love so much, who is not 100 miles away, told me of a case where she was treating a little boy, and it was wonderful, where he climbed up on something in her consultation room and said, "I like a podium." And that's the truth, isn't it? That's the truth. How long? 5? 3? 2?
I'll give you 5.
2. We had a case, and I've told a lot of people this because I'll never forget it. We had a case in the Welsh School of Homeopathy. There was a fella sitting there, he was a big hairy fella, played the guitar, smoked roll-ups, liked a pint, had 5 kids, but he wasn't sure yet if he wanted to make a commitment to the mother. 55 years old, and I took to the guy immediately, I thought it was wonderful. As you would, if you knew. But the interesting thing was, he told us his story, and his father and his mother had become separated when he was 10 or 11 years old, and his father had come to the house to give the boys money. And the mother had seen this, called the police. The police took the father away, and he never saw his father again. And when he was sort of 24, 25, he was working he was a very well-educated man. He was working as a farm labourer in a caravan, doing his egg and bacon. All of a sudden, bang, something hit him, and he fell back on the bed. And he said it was like the universe exploded into visions of the most phantasmagoric horror and the most extraordinary wonder, he said, like this, like that. And since then, he had not been able to manifest in any way. Even though, it was a part of him was manifesting, obviously, with fathering 5 children, but there was a part of him, he was between, like when you miss when the coach turns into a pumpkin, that thing? He got stuck betwixt and between and never come back. And anyway, I said to the class, "What did you notice?" And they're going, "Well, they all noticed the fact that his father had turned up and they'd never seen him again, which it was sad, but it had no juice. Do you know what I mean? And there's we have a horrible tendency to identify with pain. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you watch the news, even occasionally, you'll know why. It's like we associate ourselves with the pain of the patient. What we need to do is to associate ourselves with the rhythm and the vibration of the patient, not the emotional pain. Because the problem is that you'll then identify with the victim. Don't identify with the victim. That's allopathic. You have to identify with the symptom creator. Every symptom has two parts. There's the part that's suffering from it. There's also the part that's giving it. That's the one you need to tune into, right? Tune into the symptom creator. Tune into the symptom creator. Don't tune into the victim. Oh, because emotions are contagious. Anyone ever been to a football match? You know what it's like? Emotions are contagious. They are the most contagious thing. They're much more contagious than measles, chickenpox, and anything else. So you can get infected with the emotion and get sucked into a place where your capacity to perceive disappears. Anyway, what did you notice? What did you notice? Oh, this sad bit, and I'm thinking like this. And we had a student who was dyslexic, and she's going like this. I said, hang on. I said, don't, wait. Anybody notice anything? And the woman who was in there with the patient, I said, what was he wearing? What was he wearing? T-shirt. Oh, well, very good. What colour was it? Blue? You're hot. No flies on you. So I said to the woman who was going like this, Mel, I said, come on, here's the board marker, write what it said on the T-shirt. OP. OP. So this is the truth. And I tell you what, the video recorder didn't work. And if I'd got that on video, man, I'd be dialing out on it for the rest of my life. But that was the most powerful learning experience with me. No, not identify. Don't identify with the victim. You can be warm-hearted and loving towards them. You know, they're a fellow wounded one. But identify with the symptom creator. That's the secret of the whole damn thing. He got his opium, proposed to her, moved in, because he'd been in the caravan for the last 30 years. You know? Had a shave. You know, it was quite remarkable. It's a fucking miracle. It was a miracle. Are we done? Well, I'd like to say thank you so much, and I've loved being with you today.